Welcome to Team Perry's Step Out of Line podcast, featuring co-hosts Perry and Lori Finkelstein. Together, they explore, meet, and share inspirational stories with guests who have made a positive impact in today's world. This podcast resonates with our hope to make this world a better place one step at a time through love, acceptance, and uplifting conversations.
So I'm Xian Horn. I'm a disability advocate, speaker, teacher, Forbes Contributor. I have the blessing of cerebral palsy my whole life, and I really believe that it has opened more doors than it's closed. I think part of that was because I was an only child with parents who told me anything was possible, and I believed them. And I have artist parents, so they always emphasize uniqueness over conformity. We're all a little bit strange in my family, and I think maybe everybody's a little bit strange. Maybe that's the beauty of being human. I had been fired from my first job right out of college, and I hadn't looked for a job in about 10 months. I was dating the wrong guy. And his way of dealing with my being fired was, hey, let's make out and I'll cook for you. Like there was no sense of like, okay, don't worry, I'll support you in this next thing or you can do it. And I started to really doubt myself. They wanted me to do things like faxing and collating, and I'm just not fast with that stuff. That's not my gift. And once you realize that, then you can actually get a job where you can say, well, these are my gifts instead. I was too green at the time to know that. And so all I knew was that they didn't want me anymore. And so for 10 months, I was kind of depressed and I didn't look for a job. And my grandmother died, and my dad was fighting for her apartment. And we went to court to, defend him or at least support him. We went downstairs. I said to my mom, I want to get a cranberry juice. So when we went to get the cranberry juice, I noticed there was a Grandma Utz's potato chips that my friend had just been telling me about. So I just got one little pack. It was 50 cents. And I said to him, keep the change. When I turned around, my mom said, what did you do with the change? And I said, oh, I told him to keep it. He was a really smiley guy. And also, I was buying such a small thing, I figured let him keep the change. Well, unbeknownst to me, there was some financial issues going on. And so my mom freaked out. This is how you spend your father's money. This is not how I was raised. This is not my mom's usual. So it was very shocking to me. And she said, because you did this, we're going to take the subway instead of taking a cab. And I just sobbed the entire way on the subway. And she kept telling me to apologize. And I said, not only will I not apologize, I'm ashamed that we're even having this conversation, because this is not how you raised me, Mom. As a people pleaser, I think this was really the first time that I stood up for something I believed in. The way I see it now is because this happened, I actually ended up leaving the house, kind of getting kicked out, kind of kicking myself out, because I said I can't be in a house where giving to somebody is not allowed. And so it motivated me to start looking for a job. And I looked on idealist.org and I saw this job for a grant writer for a theater in New York that included disabled actors. And if I hadn't had that fire in my belly to like, I have to move out on my own, I got to do this, I would have never seen it. I don't like to tell that story because I don't want people to think that my mom was anything but a wonderful mom. But I believe in that moment, she was used as a catalyst to catapult me into the greatest period of my life. I think that was me stepping out of line or stepping in line with something and standing for what I believed. My mom has, in her own life, she has some fear because of some things she went through in childhood around poverty. And that's where this thing was coming from. It wasn't trying to be cruel to a man she didn't know or even being cruel to her daughter. But I'm so grateful looking back that led me to kind of unlock my entire purpose. I also realized that I grew up in a bubble in a sense because my parents got me into the right school with the right supports, the right doctors. I'm not going to say it was easy. I will say I grew up having myasthenia gravis where I couldn't open my eyes. And then I did have a cyst on my left armpit, got two or three that was the size of a lemon that had to be removed. I had more surgeries than I could remember. And actually, most of them happened before I could remember. So I don't know how many I've had actually. I will say that I have met in New York City the most amazing people ever. I think that so much of my life was enhanced by having a disability. Now, I always say that my life is better because I have a disability, not easier. It's richer. The people I get to meet, like you two. And so I did not intend to be a disability advocate. I traverse the world with two shiny ski poles. And so I was already calling a lot of attention to myself on any New York City street, so I felt advocacy would almost be the obvious thing to do. And I think growing up, and I think it's changed, there was this sense that whoever was different had to be scrappy and adapt to the world. And I think now there's more of a sense of I'm here, it's your job to welcome me. But I think what was good about that is I really grew up feeling like there wasn't anything that I couldn't do that everybody else was doing. I might do it differently. I dance, I swim, I fill in the blank. And so I think, in a way, maybe my first stepping out of line was sort of resisting what everybody expected of me as a young person. People kind of wanted to make me a poster child of something. And it wasn't until I became more aware of all the things that Judy Heumann fought for, all the institutional barriers that came before us, Perry, that I kind of had the luxury, because we had the ADA, of sort of assuming the best. You know, I knew I cut the lines at Disney World and the airport. Even that's changing now. But I was very aware of all the things that disability enabled for us. I'm not trying to gloss over the things that are difficult, but I really wasn't paying attention to the inequity in architecture, the inequity in transportation, the inequity in employment. All of that came to me later. And I really started this work running workshops on self esteem when I realized that my friends and colleagues were suicidal or struggling with disability identity because of who they were. That really bothered me. That was not okay with me. It was not something I expected to do. I actually was always trying to call less attention, not more, just because I already knew that I was a bit of a spectacle everywhere I go. And for whatever reason, I feel like whatever it is that God makes us stand out for, we should embrace. And sometimes it takes a while to get there and to realize, like, no, this is exactly who I'm supposed to be. You know, I'm not supposed to be perfect, but it doesn't mean I'm any less beautiful.
Perry, you didn't want the spotlight, but then it happened and you said, okay, I'm here. What am I going to do with it? But not everybody takes it. It's a choice that you made.
Well, one thing I always did is I kind of took an ambassadorial approach to it when people would approach me on the street or ask questions or start a conversation, because I realized I may be the first person with a disability they're interacting with. And I don't mind, the questions. I know that I'm going to get stared at just as you would stare at someone with purple hair or if they're 6'7". So that was one thing I think that I never made that decision. I just realized that from a very young age that that was going to be my life. And I said, well, I could either take that moment where someone looks at me and smile at them and make that an opportunity to connect, or I can just feel terrible about being. I don't even remember making that decision. I just think that I was so used to it by the time I was old enough to realize it was happening. I think I was not comfortable sticking my neck out publicly beyond that.
You must have emulated how your mom was to other people when she was with you. Did she start you on this path saying this is our normal and we are going to be transparent and this is just the way we are? And then you picked up on it.
My parents, because they never made me feel like less, they always made me feel like more. I just felt like more no matter how I was treated. And I knew I was more. Even if someone was disrespectful, I brushed that off as a them problem, not a me problem. And I wish I was this confident as a girl becoming a woman. I want to be clear that the one area of my life that you could never touch was my disability, because I knew what it meant to me. I knew all the people that I got to meet every day. I knew, again, that I cut the lines. I knew there were some special powers that existence, even in the face of all those difficulties.
So you started a foundation, which is how we met you at one of your events.
Give Beauty Wings is my nonprofit, which started as a self-esteem program for girls and women and people with disabilities. And the idea was always putting our beauty and our gifts to action. And what do we do with the gifts we have? What do we do with, potential is one thing, but what are the actions that beauty brings us, or that we can bring with our beauty? Give Beauty Wings itself as an organization has really grown into a place where we're having conversations that no one else is having. Disability and money. I'd like to do a disability and dating workshop. This year, I'm going to be celebrating disabled artists, but having conversations around disability that I don't see happening elsewhere. And that's why the inclusive beauty and fashion event was so important, is that I want to celebrate what is happening so we can do more to make beauty and fashion more inclusive. And eventually, I'd like Give Beauty Wings to be a place where we can give people opportunities and really foster more leadership within our community. I mean, that's also my Forbes platform. That was actually the inspiration. And the column is leadership empowerment from a disability lens, because I said to them, I don't see anyone talking in and around leadership and disability. I think a lot of the reasons that we're not seeing as much inclusion as we'd like is that we don't have disabled leaders at the helm of a lot of these projects. They're run by other people who project what they think we need, instead of, someone from within the community who knows what we need and talks to us and amplifies other voices.
We actually interviewed a woman who started Sewn Adaptive, who, and just her way of thinking, of saying this can be worn by everybody. Just to have somebody take your hand and say, I could fix it for you, is incredible. We need more people like that. And a lot of people don't know the resources.
For me, that was Open Style Lab. That was my experience in 2016, was kind of my first foray into anything fashion related. My mom went to FIT. My dad was a model, and he's the first metrosexual that ever lived. I thought my parents were the fashion people, and I'm just this big hippie with holes in my jeans and holes in my shoes. I dragged my left foot, so shoes were always a struggle. I would only be able to find really one or two pairs at a time that I would not be embarrassed to wear to school. And then I would wear that out in at most 2-3 months if I was lucky. And then I have to do that again. I think that for both fashion and beauty, I was a bit intimidated. My mom always told me natural beauty was best. And, if you don't have to wear makeup, don't do it. Sorry to all the brands that I work with. Because my mom was in the beauty industry, that meant more to me, because I think beauty should enhance what we have, not hide who we are. I work with Open Style Lab at Parsons. I had asked Grace when I first met her. It was raining that day, and I said, it's raining today. I can't carry an umbrella, and my hands are occupied with the ski poles. Is there something that you can make for me that doesn't look like a Disneyland poncho that I can wear to speaking engagements? And she said, absolutely. She created this team around me. They followed me around for half a day. They watched me put my coat on. I have to be seated to put a coat on. And they noticed that I kept getting it caught on the back of my chair, because Give Beauty Wings was my nonprofit. They actually put purple wings inside the coat. They made me a hired coattail so that it would no longer get caught. They put in moisture wicking, because when I'm skiing a lot, I'm half my father and I sweat. All those little details, I think, gave me something that was even bigger than fashion. They really opened up the idea that I could have a role in fashion. I mean, isn't it every girl's dream to have a couture garment?
And just on a side note, we spent half our life at Payless crawling on the floor with her PT, trying to find shoes that would fit her.
Judy Human, who is the reason that we have 504, the precursor to the ADA, the godmother of our disability rights movement. She also had the frustration of only being able to find one pair of shoes that fit her from the kids section in Payless. And she wore 10 copies of that same pair for 20 years and worked with 3 or 4 presidents. And she could afford other types of shoes. But even if she were to try something new, she was afraid it wasn't going to fit her like that one shoe. I really believe that everybody should have the option to have choice. We should have an embarrassment of riches of options for everyone, and they should be affordable. That's another form of accessibility, because I'll tell you, Judy had a pair of Italian leather shoes made for the Academy Awards. And when she wanted to buy them, they wanted $8,000 for them.
Perry wore the same white sandals with Velcro for maybe 12 years. And then I would just get every size possible to have for the future.
And you're a baby.
Right.
You know, I guess I haven't seen it. I just didn't like it.
And I was crying, so grateful something fit her foot. I didn't care at that point. I would talk her into it.
I can relate to your story myself, because there was a pair of Merrill Mary Janes. I would get them in every color conceivable, and I wore the same exact slip-on Mary Janes because they were quality leather. I could wear them with jeans or at weddings. At a certain point, I felt like I'm a professional woman. I want to dress like a woman, and I'm still in these Mary Janes. And I actually, the moment for me was kind of an embarrassing moment, in the sense that I got interviewed on NPR about my shoes. The last line in this woman's story, and she meant it as a way of encouraging people to design for me, but she said, please, somebody design something so she can throw out these tired Mary Janes. After that, I was like, I don't want to wear tired Mary Janes ever again. The good part of that is that I found that there's a certain kind of chunky heel that I can wear quite well. And so I actually transitioned from the Mary Janes to other things. And thank God for online shopping. I think we do have more options than we would have before online shopping was a thing. After a while, I mean, those Mary Janes were nice and all, but I started to feel like plain Jane. And I knew that that's not how I felt inside. So I wanted the inside and the outside to match. And especially with the self-esteem work that I do, I think that was also my goal in doing the workshops, is we want the inside and the outside to match. If you come out of a workshop feeling like a million bucks, then you should look like $1 million too. Started as a 6-week program at NYU and Initiative for Women with Disabilities. And the last day, I would always encourage everyone to choose their own clothes. And the reason I say that is that some of my students, that was the first time they would tell me afterwards, this is the first time I've actually chosen my dress today, or I chose to wear my favorite color. There was a girl who actually came in her bathing suit because she loves to swim. I loved that. There was a reason that I left that to the last class. I wanted the inside and the outside to match. After they had done all this inner work, after we had worked together for those weeks, I wanted it to feel like a celebration. The reason I'm so passionate about this work is, like, self-esteem, we're never done. It's not like, oh, I'm confident now, I can just, finish. You have to fight for your beauty every day. And you have to choose the light and find the sparkle, even when you don't feel it sometimes. You've got to claim that sparkle, and claim our space.
What is it growing up?
You go to mainstream school?
So I started at UCP for preschool. I think that was a great way to start, because I always knew there were others like me. Nobody's exactly like you, and that's the interesting thing. I think you probably find that with muscular dystrophy too, is like everybody presents differently, but there's certain commonalities. But after UCP, United Cerebral Palsy, a lot of the students that I went to school with went into special ed, and I went mainstream. So I was the only kid with a visible physical disability in most of my classes. I think my parents created a sort of springboard that by the time I got into regular school, I was so interested in connecting with the person on how we're similar. I remember kids saying to me, oh, but Sean, you're normal, right? Whatever normal means. What they were really asking me was, it's okay to talk to you, right? We're not that different, right? That I understood the subtext of that even at a young age. They were asking for permission to connect with me. So I would always say yes, even though I didn't know what that meant. But what I meant was, yes, we're more the same than we are different. Maybe my message isn't for all 7 or 8 billion of us. I think it is still our mission to get that out, that we are valuable as human beings, that we have power, that we have agency, that we have something that's unique to only us that we can contribute into the world. It is my job to get that message out. And whoever can receive that and see that and values that, and it means something to them, that is way more important than the people who don't get it.
Perry had posted her feelings in a picture on Instagram a number of times. One of them has 2 million views. She doesn't know how. And she got a lot of negative feedback. She kept turning off the comments and turning on. People were disgusting and negative, as many as people were positive almost. And at first, I could tell she was like really upset. She made people feel, I think, better about themselves who were ready to receive a message. So it was worth it for her to post just to inspire other people to look into themselves and see what they can do.
I pitched the Dove campaign in 2010, asking them to include people with disabilities in their advertising because no major company had done it yet. And they passed on it twice. So I took this class for actors because I knew I was going to be pitching a major company. And I kind of wanted, I don't know why I decided to take a class for actors, but she wanted you to also start a newsletter. And she basically said, unless you have a certain number of people unsubscribing every month, you haven't gone big enough. So I think the social media equivalent of that is if you aren't getting hate comments, you're not going big enough. Is there something that you wish existed that we could create? If it was Perry's world, which it is, like, is there something that you would like to see that isn't there right now?
I wish I saw more people like me in the media. You know, like who have their own body of work, like podcasts or they're writing. More people listen to it, and I think in turn it will help get more people like me speaking on stages like public speaking. I have a friend who has physical disability, but she looks completely normal. She just in the chair and she can hide everything else under her clothes, and you wouldn't know. I can't hide anything, and I have a vent, I have a drink, I have a lot that people are afraid of. And so I can't get places where I should be or I want to go because
People have a bias
Yeah.
against you because she has
what
an outwardly different physical appearance than somebody else, and it is scary. Like,
it's not just getting around the hair, and that weird tooth thing coming out of her neck.
people are so against people who are different, so that people like Perry, who is very creative, whether it's going to be like in her editing or podcasting or social media, or people who are, in any form of any kind of creative environment, are not getting shown enough because of their disability.
I think there's a kind of freedom. You said you can't hide. Like, I think getting to a point where you're like, I don't want to hide it. And if you have a problem with it, that's your problem. Like, I think about someone growing up, I met him when I was in high school at my lowest point. I mean, in the sense that I could count on one hand the number of kids that would talk to me. I felt incredibly self-conscious and exposed at school every day. I had the braces on, pimples for days, all that stuff. There's a documentary about him. His name is Jeffrey Holder, and I really loved him. He played Punjab in Annie, which he couldn't today. He played the villain in Live and Let Die in the 70s. He was a 7-Up guy. He was very famous for his voice. And by the way, he stuttered until I think he was at least 14. And then he became so famous for his voice. They asked him, as the only Black man in most rooms, how did you navigate the 50s? How did you navigate these rooms? And he said, well, I always assumed that if I was in a room where they didn't want me, there was something wrong with the room, not me. And I also think the more people are exposed to things that are different, the less uncomfortable we will become. So the more media that we do garner, the less of these things I hope will happen. I believe that too. A lot of people just don't know how to cope with something they've never seen before, but that's not on you, Harry, you know? I remember I was going to speak at Microsoft and the meeting was at 7 o'clock. And so it was just about 6 o'clock and I was in the cab and the guy immediately said, "Going to the doctor? Are there any doctors open at 6 o'clock at night?" Like, and I said, actually, and I would not normally do this. I told him I'm going to speak at Microsoft. Why did I do that? Because I wanted him to hear, no, as people with disabilities, we go out for lots of reasons. I just felt it was important in that moment to state out why I was going. I'm a working woman. You're taking me to work. And because I did that, I didn't even have to correct him because immediately he just started asking me questions. And you could tell he was very open to what I had to say. He just made an assumption that hopefully he won't make if he were to have you in his cab next. Every chance we have to kind of, mess with stereotypes is a good thing. I think what you're saying, though, is we need more representation of all kinds of disabilities, not just the pretty kinds, not just the more iconic or acceptable forms of disability, but every disability. I was approached by a very famous art school on Instagram and asked if I would be willing to do a 360 wheelie in a wheelchair in an ad for them. And my first question to them was, why aren't you going to someone in an actual wheelchair for this? And I said, I don't feel comfortable sort of playing a wheelchair. I mean, I do use a wheelchair for like Disney or at museums or the airport for sure. So I occasionally use a wheelchair, but as a not regular wheelchair user, I didn't feel comfortable like sort of playing one. So I said, look, I'm not comfortable doing that, but I did a little video doing it my way, never heard from them again. Because, and it might not be the case, but I feel that they had a visual in mind. They wanted the chair, they wanted the spinning, they had an idea of what they wanted the disability to look like on film. There's so many disabled influencers in chairs, and it made me feel almost like I wasn't disabled enough or the right kind of disabled. I wonder if you have this experience too, because I find being disabled, one of the perks of being disabled is that people feel, I think, overall much more comfortable telling us things they've been through, or like I get cab drivers, telling me their entire life story and that their kids have disabilities and confessing things that they don't even necessarily tell their family. I had a driver say to me, I have HIV. My family doesn't know. I hugged him because I thought, how difficult must that be?
I think people tell you because they know you've been through a lot. And people open up to Perry for sure. Sometimes you don't know what to do with it. You just listen and say, I don't have what you have, but I understand the feelings that you're feeling and I get it.
I find that obviously sometimes it might, veer on trauma dumping where they're telling you too much. For the most part, I feel so honored when people are sharing what they're going through with me because they don't have to. That moment of connection, we connect more on weakness than strength. Nobody can relate to perfect. I really enjoy the part of us where we can be human and be flawed together, and share what that's like.